Good evening, everybody. Can I welcome you to this meeting of Scrutiny on Wednesday, the 6th of March. We're in the Wharton Suite, and my name is Councillor Caroline Brooke, and I'm chairperson of this committee. Some housekeeping points before we start. This meeting is recorded, live streamed, and will be available on the council's YouTube channel. And can everyone please ensure mobile phones are on silent or switched off? In the unlikely event it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound, and please follow the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome everyone to the meeting, and a warm welcome to Chief Inspector Corinne Bishop on her first meeting with us. Thank you for coming along, and she's the District Commander for Winchester. So turning to the agenda, Matthew, do we have any apologies tonight?
Good evening, Chair. Members, no apologies, and all members are present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Williams.
Just as the Council's Deputy Member for the Police and Crime Commissioner panel.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I have no announcements this evening, so moving to the minutes of the meeting on 6th of February 2024. Has everybody had a chance to look at these, and are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, public participation. So Councillor Lee, I understand we've got you speaking on the community safety part, and the Q3 report and forward plan on key decisions. Is that right? Would you like to speak on each of them at the time just before? Yep, no problem. And Councillor Bolton, I believe we've got you speaking as well on item 7. Okay, wonderful. So coming on to the community safety partnership performance review, we've got Councillor Becker who'll give an intro. We've got Chief Inspector Bishop who will give a brief intro, and we've got Councillor Lee. So Councillor Lee, if I can ask you to come forwards, and then we'll have the introductions.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. Good evening, everybody. Many services affecting our residents are delivered by partnerships or bodies beyond the boundaries of Winchester City Council. I therefore welcome the work of the Winchester Community Safety Partnership and the performance update to December 2023. Plus, I welcome the new serious violence duty for relevant services to work together to prevent and reduce serious violence within our local communities. I note the welcome news at figure 3 table for quality of life, with the antisocial behaviour reports instance are in a downward trend. But I thought I'd raise a subject which has been represented to me from my ward, and that is the issue and the concern about the forthcoming shutdown of the current landline telephone system phased for completion by 2025. I believe this is a relevant Winchester community safety issue. Residents are very anxious about how they will report future criminal incidents affecting themselves or neighbours, plus obtaining blue light medical services during power outages. The phase out of landlines means a switch to digital voice, which will be more prone to power outages. Yes, battery backup will be available if requested. However, they will only be functional for a limited duration. So very troublingly is the communications will not work if the outage problems is further along the communication chain at the telephone interchange. Plus, if power is lost to an area, not only will all the landline communications go down, but also all mobile phone communications, as many mobile phone towers are powered, and most do not have battery backup. Therefore, without clear mitigation plans, there will be an increased risk of total communication lost in an area following a power outage, creating considerable concern for communities. Residents in poor or non-existent mobile phone covered areas, which is particularly prevalent in my ward, are more adversely affected than in other areas. Another issue of concern is the mobile phone telephone providers, as many of you will know, are switching off the 3G services, with implications for devices such as care and security alarms using the 3G network. The committee would wish to note that myself and other councillors in Central Meon Valley have raised these communications concerns to our council senior policy and programme manager, with requests for visibility of the impact on obviously our big emergency events. It is understood that the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Local Resilience Forum, of which the council is a partner, has a widespread electricity loss plan, which I suggest should be made more transparent to all. So my question for the committee is, please, can we bring these attentions, A, to the Cabinet and to the wider Winchester Community Safety Partnership with a request for reassurances from partners and other agencies that they will be working together for transparent solutions with clear information advice for our communities to quell anxiety. I suggest the key focus should be on the vulnerable and elderly as soon as possible, particularly in remote rural areas such as my Central Meon Valley ward. I believe this is an important and critical issue which we as a council should be monitoring for proper attention, and I apologise if this is already being done but is not transparent to our communities or myself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'm not sure that's anything that can be answered specifically this evening, but I've made notes for it to be taken away. I'm not sure, Ms Taylor, if you'd like to add anything.
Certainly, thank you, Chair. Councillor Lee, you said the words that I was going to say, which is it's a matter for us to raise with the LRF because it is clearly a nationwide issue, not only a Winchester issue, and we would expect there to be a national contingency plan for this. And my colleague Simon Hendy and Simon Howson both work closely with the LRF. So I think let's take that away and we can provide an update in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Becker, would you like to do a brief intro before we move to?
Thank you. Very happy to. Apologies for that slight interruption. We'll see how long she holds out. Very happy to bring this paper forward. This is an annual paper that comes to this committee every year. The council, as you know, is a responsible authority and supports the delivery of crime and the disorder statutory duty by dedicating officer posts to this role, recognising that our ward councillors are the eyes and ears of our community, and we also ensure that the corporate vision supports feelings of safety for all of those who live, work and visit Winchester. You'll see in the report that the Community Safety Partnership has achieved a great deal with some significant success over the past year around enforcement, grant fund applications to the OPCC and increased collaborative working across the district with other local CSPs. Sorry, that's Community Safety Partnership. Antisocial behaviour, we know, is a focus in a lot of our communities, and it's very much been a focus for the partnership. This year, we've called a number of ad hoc meetings where there have been incidents of antisocial behaviour to try and quell those before the situation got out of hand. And there's been a lot of partnership activity aimed at reducing antisocial behaviour across the district. We've got additional patrols at the moment, street briefs, we've done letter drops of the ASB report it flyers. These little beauties, if you haven't seen them before. And we have also introduced the delivery of acceptable behaviour contracts. And we're very pleased to note that our amazing antisocial behaviour lead, Davina Demon Hollands, she has been nominated for the Tackling Antisocial Behaviour category in this year's PCC Awards. So we're very proud of her. Just want to note that. We have data, you'll see there's in the report, there's data about domestic violence and abuse. This has been a focus of the CSP for the year. While the data does refer to women as victims of violence and abuse, we do, as a partnership, obviously promote national campaigns and access to services for all victims of domestic violence, recognising that it's not just women who suffer domestic violence and abuse. The 2022-23 year saw greater reports of young people coming to the attention of partner agencies, much more than we've seen in the pre-pandemic period. And in response, the Community Safety Partnership has focused on trying to tackle the causal effects and the impact some young people have had on others. We've supported grant fund applications that put in place greater outreach opportunities. We've put in place mentoring projects. We've collaborated with and signposted to other support services, and we have provided early intervention and diversionary activities to those at risk of causing issues in their communities. The Community Safety Partnership's always keen to try and collect comparable data wherever possible, so we are speaking to other responsible service leads to see if they can share their data as well, so we can see how we're doing and what others are doing. And we're looking to do that in the future. So without further ado, we have Sandra Tuddenham, who most of you will know as our lead officer for the Community Safety Partnership. And as you've already said Councillor Brooke, we have Corinne Bishop here for her very first scrutiny meeting. She joined as District Commander in, was it May last year? So just missed the last scrutiny meeting. So she's here to answer any questions you may have on the data in the report as well. Thanks.
Thank you. We actually brought the last scrutiny meeting forward just so we could get John Turton in, so I could try and embarrass him, but it didn't work and he didn't cry or anything.
I know,
Very
and we kept him on at the council. We loved him so much.
Corinne, over to you for a presentation, if we may. Thank you.
Got to put my glasses on to read, but then I can't see you, so bear with me. I'm going to have to keep taking them on and off. Taken over from John, some very big shoes to fill. I know that he left in February. Coming to Winchester, probably loved every minute so far, and it's a really nice place to work. So I just want to give you a little introduction about me. I'm going to talk a bit about our new policing priorities, touch on what crime looks like, what our resourcing is, and also a bit about communication and what I need from you to tell your constituents how you can help and support us, and then hopefully any questions you've got at the end. So my name is Corinne Bishop. I've been a police officer for 27 years. I started my career up in the Metropolitan Police and then came back to Hampshire in 2000, where I've worked in Portsmouth, Southampton within training. And the last 6 years, I've been the Royal Crime Lead for Hampshire Constabulary as the Country Watch Inspector, a role that I didn't want to leave, but then I put in promotion and got this role. So for me, the two more beautifully into each other, because I can bring my knowledge from what I've dealt on rural crime to some aspects of Winchester. And for me, Winchester's got a bit of everything. We've got a nighttime economy, we've got a cathedral, we've got a prison, we've got universities, we've got a rural area. So for me, it's got a bit of everything that hopefully help improve that crime picture. I also have a national lead. I lead for equine crime under the National Priority Delivery Group. The ironic thing is I can't ride and I'm really allergic to horses, but it helps me stay a little bit on the fence so I can actually see it from all aspects. What that does give me, it gives me really good links in nationally to nearly every police force, including Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales. So that helps me build pictures, and if we have issues in this area, I can reach out to some of my colleagues to see if there's other better solutions. I'm also Duke of Edinburgh leader for the force. I run our Police Cadets Duke of Edinburgh scheme. I've been a leader for the last 12 years, and I'm a real advocate for working with young people and bringing them forward. And a lot of our cadets are now within the police. So it's a real passion of mine. I do it outside of work. And we've got a bronze, silver and gold group running this year. So we started our training last week. So that's a little bit about me. So we had a new Chief Constable who started last year. He's been in post now a year. He was born and bred as a Hampshire police officer. He went away to Dorset and he's now come back with Scott Chilton. And he wanted to simplify our priorities. So our priorities, I'm going to put my glasses on now because I need to be honest, is that relentless pursuit of criminals. So what does that actually mean? Creating a hostile environment for our criminals, bringing more offenders to justice, which is one of our focuses and priorities, being visible and proactive and enforcement activities to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour, and restore an investigative mindset. We have a really young workforce, so we've had a number of new officers come into the force. We're still in that process of training them, so our numbers are increasing, but it's just trying to get that investigative mindset over to officers at that first point of call. Maximise use of information and intelligence. That's where community intelligence is really important, and how we can use that to try and tackle what we're looking at doing. And then working with our other agencies. So that's the first one, relentless pursuit of criminals. Second one is putting victims first. So prioritising the victims through their journey and keeping them informed. Being more victim-led and not just process-led mindset, and listening to responding to the voice of the victim, including voice of the child, which is really important. Also to prevent and reduce victimisation and work with our partners to support victims. And the third one is exceptional local policing. So that's to making sure that we deliver the police and crime plan, making sure that our neighbourhood policing is visible, connected and trusted, and keeping our rural communities safe,
and also then maximise the impact using our volunteers and partnership. There's lots more behind that. I'm happy to provide a copy of that and breakdown if anybody would like that, but that's what we are focusing on now, on those three priorities. And as a district commander, I'm held accountable to make sure that we deliver against that. And for me, what I really need for you to go out to your constituents is we need people to report crime. If they've had a bad experience, that there may be a reason, well, there's no point in reporting, you're not going to do anything. We get some reports made to one person and they want to do it on behalf of everybody else. We need each individual person to report crime, because that gives us that pattern of behaviour and knowing where we need to put our resources. So that's really key. So crime then, over the period of last year from January to December, crime was down by 16.1% from the previous year. Our charge and summonses were up by 11.4% and our out-of-court disposals were up by 4.9%. So our overall sort of charge and summons rate was 17% compared to 13.2% the previous year. Our biggest increase has been around shoplifting. Now, crime commission has gone down across the board. Apart from shoplifting, it's the only one of the main areas nationally that we've seen an increase. A number of reasons. It could be people are more confident now in reporting. It may also be cost of living and a number of other reasons why we see that. What we've done though is to make sure we've targeted that. So even though our crime is going down, our charge and summon rates is going up. So as long as those two graphs do that, I'm happy. District Commander and the Chief's happy as well, which is really good. So we'll continue to do that. So in 2013, there was 2,312 reported crimes of shoplifting, and our formal action taken against that was 42%. So we're nearly clearing half of that up. And that's a 239% increase from the previous year. A lot of that work has been working in partnership with Sandra's team, with the bid rangers, and my neighbourhood teams. And what we've done is we've targeted the top 20% who probably commit 80% of the crime. And we've had 10 people who've been issued with community behaviour orders. What that does is it bans them from coming into the city centre where they're causing the most harm. Now, to get a community behaviour order, it's not just shoplifting, it's the antisocial behaviour bit that's attached to that. We then go to the court with all of that information, and then the court make that decision and put those orders on. So we've currently got 10. Southampton aren't happy with this because a lot of our people have gone to Southampton, but they're not in Winchester. Mm-hmm. So we will continue to do that. We continue working with all of our stores. Again, if there's issues on the other side of Winchester, at the Whiteley side, we'll be looking at doing that as well. So in relation to district priorities, every day when we come in, we review the previous 24 hours of crime that have happened. It'll either be myself or one of the inspectors will look at that. If there's a crime that hasn't been allocated or we haven't been sent to, and that there's opportunities there that have been missed. So it might be that you've called in, your shed's been broken into, you say, nothing's been taken, I've got no CCTV, I don't need to see a police officer. I come in the morning and I see that there's been 10 crimes in the same road. For me, that's the area that I need to be focusing on. So that is done on a daily basis. So just because someone's reported something and they haven't seen a police officer, that doesn't mean that we're not seeing those crimes. So for me, that's a really key part of our day-to-day business, making sure that we pick those up. That helps us look for trends. We then have a monthly tactical planning meeting. Sandra comes and attends that. And that's where we set our district priorities for the month. And that is where we're looking at what are the issues. So at the moment, over the weekend, we've had a number of dwelling and non-dwelling breaks. So we've had some bikes stolen. That's been spattered all across Winchester and into our other areas. We've made that as a district priority for this month. So a number of resources are being put into that. And we've got some offenders, hopefully, on the back of it. Recent investigations, I know there's issues with bike thefts at the train station. We've worked really closely with British Transport Police on that. So the crimes aren't recorded under Hampshire Constabulary because it sits with British Transport Police. We've got a number of nominals that we are targeting and are under investigation. There's also a number of bike thefts that have been stolen from stores. That is a regional investigation at the moment. Can't go into details, but we've got a number of people that we're looking at in relation to that as well. Keyless car thefts. If you have a keyless car, especially if it's a Land Rover, a Mercedes or a BMW, They are being stolen at the moment, so please try and encourage everybody to target hard. And if you have got one of those, put one of the bars. People have got a special device. We've got some work going on in the background as to how we can target that, and also looking how we can design out that from a manufacturer's point of view as well. We continue to focus on ASB issues across all areas of the district, working really closely with, we've got a new ASB coordinator, ASB panel, and that's looking at hotspots and repeat victims. Rural crime as well, there's an operation called Operation Galileo, which is in relation to illegal hair coursing. Some of that is also linked to some of our non-dwelling burglaries, so there's a number of non-rules that we're targeting there as well. Number of joint partnership meetings we have, as I said, the tactical planning meeting, which is police-led. We have a violence against women and girls panel. We also have Operation Fortress, which is looking at cuckooing, which is people's addresses being used in relation to drug-related harm. And also Winchester Schools meeting, where we discuss youth intervention, and also a legacy project, which is around one-to-one mentoring for young people. Also a Safer Streets initiative, where we're working at the moment around burglaries and providing DNA packs for people to add to their valuables. So resourcing, we have 4 stations across Winchester. We have Mottisfont, which is here in the city centre, which is open to the public during the day. Out of that office is my neighbourhood team. We've also got a response team out of Winnell, and 2 other neighbourhood stations at Bishop's Waltham and Alresford. And the good news is by the end of the summer, there will also be a response team out of Bishop's Waltham. So we're having an increase in establishment of 10 officers. So I'll be able to put 2 extra on each shift. For those of you that look after the areas over that way, Bishop's Waltham at the moment is serviced from a 999 response by Waterlooville and Fareham. However, the crime still sits under me to oversee that. By having a dedicated 24/7 unit in Bishop's Waltham, that's going to give it extra resources. However, I'm aware that some areas are like a half a mile from Waterlooville. It will still be the closest unit that will be sent. So it won't just be, they won't be coming from Winnell. So you'll be able to reassure people of that as well. We also now have our dedicated named officers, designated named officers, DNOs. If you're not aware who those are, for Winchester, it's Tom Harries. For Winchester North, Mark Jeffries, Winchester City Centre, and Will Andrews for Winchester South. Winchester Rural is Hayley Goodsell, and in Bishop's Waltham, we've got Rob Power that covers Westmeath, Hambledon, Denmead and Swanwick, a small area, and Sharon Conway, Oswaldbury, Curdridge, Wickham and Whiteley. That amounts to 42 response officers, 21 police officers within neighbourhoods and 15 PCSOs. But that's not the only people that are patrolling. So at any one time, you've got roads policing unit, armed response vehicles, dog units. We also have arrest cars and a domestic car out most days as well. So to finish off, in relation to communication, today we launched something called Let's Talk. Have you all heard of Hants Alert? If you haven't heard of Hants Alert, please go onto the website, sign yourself up, encourage all of your constituents to sign up to Hants Alert. We will send you out information about what is occurring in your area. Let's Talk is a communication survey initiative that aims to understand the needs of our local communities, enable them to better share concerns. We will use this survey, which can be done face-to-face. We are looking at going door knocking, and also it can be sent via a live link to any member who's been a victim of crime. And the idea is that we're going to build trust and confidence in our communities by asking them what is a priority for them. They will be asked what's good in your area, what areas are affecting you that will benefit from joint working, anything else not listed, and what are your top issues. And from that, we can continue to work in partnership. This has actually only gone live today, so that is something that we are looking at working on to improve. So I would really encourage everybody to crime report. If there's issues with speeding in your area, please come and speak to us about setting up a speed watch initiative. Are there neighbourhood watch initiatives in your area? Again, we would encourage people to do that. And in relation to getting hold of us, 999 is still there. If something is happening, dial 999, we will come. We've also got 101 for non-emergencies, and our online, single online home where you can report crime online. For those of you who have rural businesses, we have a DISC app as well. And then in relation from a council perspective, we've got the Winchester app for reporting antisocial behaviour, Winchester City Council website, and you can also come and see us at the police station if you'd like to see us. think that is everything that I needed to cover.
Thank you very much for that. Very informative. Sandra, did you want to say anything, or is everything pretty much in the report? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So coming on to the report, I'm sure we'd all like to thank Corinne for the information provided to us. Any questions on the main body of the report? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Brilliant presentation. Fantastic for that. I just want to see how you deal with the perception of crime in an area where there's not, because obviously Winchester, supposedly to other areas in the country, is potentially probably still a low sort of crime area. But how do we deal with sometimes the residents' perception of crime? And also on the flip chart, if you want people to use Let's Talk Hampshire Alert, which is an excellent thing, like I've signed up to that. Sometimes people want the sort of report, but they're a bit frightened of the repercussion of reporting the crime. How do we deal with that to reassure members that if they are going to report it, they don't have repercussions on something which they obviously don't want suddenly on their doorstep?
So in relation to perception of crime, sometimes the media don't assist. So there can be, you say, that perception there is a crime issue. I can give an example from my previous role, dog thefts. Nationally, there was quite a media frenzy that dogs were being stolen left, right and centre. And actually, I think within Hampshire, we had 5, of which 4 were domestic related partners arguing, and the other one was located. So there wasn't an issue, but the perception felt that there was. For us, it's that communication out to the public. So we've got a number of ways that we can do that, whether that's in person, from our social media channels. We have a number of Facebook pages that people can link into. We also have our Twitter accounts, and I'm sure there's updates from a council perspective as well. That sort of answer your question. And the second point, repercussions, and I know from my previous role, people are worried about reporting. You do have Crime Stoppers where your reporting can be anonymous. So if people feel that they can't come to the police and don't want their names, they can do it through Crime Stoppers, because we will still then get the information. If someone does want to call us and speak to us, if they don't want to make a statement, we would then still record that crime. We were never going to pass someone's details on. And if by us investigating the crime is going to put that person in danger, there's things that we can put in place. So I definitely say, please still report it through Crime Stoppers if you're concerned, but then speak to the officers in relation to any concerns that you have. Does that help?
Sandra, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to come in on the back of that. So in terms of the perception of crime, sometimes we can, as a partnership, we will do a street brief or a block brief. So we come in as multi-agencies and we can do a lot of reassurance around people's perception or what they believe to be a reality. So we can, share data with them, give them facts if they've got concern about an issue. In terms of the reporting side of things, sometimes we do get a report perhaps of antisocial behaviour and the individual's scared that they're going to be identified. So what we would do is we might choose 2 or 3 streets around that area and we would do a letter drop to all those houses, and then we might follow that up with a street brief afterwards. So you can be anonymous, but also we can make it a wider partnership event.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I have 2 very specific questions. One is about 101. I represent a ward that has quite a lot of antisocial and criminal activity. Residents are told to ring 101. They struggle with that. I think it's fair to say that the reputation of 101 is not good in terms of its response, and they feel completely abandoned because people don't follow up on their reports and they feel that they're neglected. question, not necessarily just to you, but I think generally to the police force, what are we doing, and maybe to your Hampshire sort of lead and also the PCC, what are we doing to try and improve that, to make sure that residents feel that it is a number worth calling and reporting, because they don't report because they don't feel anything happens. To your point, it doesn't get recorded. The other question is, I think, a technical one. Sandra may be able to assist with this, that we've had some instances with antisocial behaviour cases, and the reporting between council and the police doesn't seem to correspond. So it perhaps gets reported to the police and then it's not cross-referenced back to us, particularly where it might be a housing tenant, and we've ended up with misunderstandings about the extent of that activity. Perhaps we haven't resolved it simply because there's no the conversations in each entity don't cross-reference. You obviously have the mechanics to do that, but clearly there's been a gap somehow in ASB reporting, and I don't know how that works in the police system. So be grateful for some clarification on that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Two really good questions. In relation to 101, yes, I can agree. Last year we weren't in a good place. A lot of work has gone into our control room. We had a lot of new staff within our contact management system out of Netley. We've got a number of different places now. So we've got them based in Winchester, Southampton, and at Netley, which is where our main headquarters are. Our timings we're back to where we need to be. So the service level agreement, in that we will answer the calls within a certain time for 101s, are now being met, which it wasn't previously. And that's where people don't call because they've had a bad experience. They've been sat on the phone. What I can say is, at very busy times, out on a Friday and a Saturday, if the calls for service are at that 999 point, there may still be a delay in those 101 calls. So I'd ask people, if they are waiting, to call back at another time, or you can go online if they're able to, if it's not an emergency. So we have improved. I can't give you numbers, I don't work in the control myself, but I know that Scott Chilton, when he came in, it was one of the first things he looked at, because we weren't in a good place, but it's much better now. And in relation to ASB, I think we've got a really good working relationship, which is growing. We've now got our new antisocial behaviour coordinator for Winchester that's going to be working with Davina to hopefully iron out some of those issues. So, yes,
Yeah, as you know, I'm an advocate for partnership working, and we've got an excellent partnership relationship with our police officers. But we also value, you know, our members informing us of what's going on in their local wards. In terms of managing the antisocial behaviour reports, they come into us in many ways, and I think sometimes there's a danger where one person gets the email, and what we've suggested is that they go into inboxes. So we've got a community safety inbox. So if they drop into that inbox, we look at that twice, 3 times a day, and it doesn't have to be one officer doing it, so we can pick it up easier that way. And I think the same for your police officers. If it's sent to one police officer and they're on leave or they're off duty, then that delays the process and us sharing the information. So again, I'm sure there's a police inbox at the local stations that would be better.
I would say that ASB reporting definitely needs to go through either single online home 101 or linking with your local dedicated DNO.
Chair, could I just ask then whether Sandra could clarify to all councillors, if we have an ASB issue, what is the best way to report that, so that we can have the coordination? Because I think some of us have experienced a lack of that, and if there is a clear process with the two of you, may help all of us to know how to do that effectively for our residents who've come to us. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we've already had a discussion about any new members, that we will run some new member training around the ASB process, the reporting process, and how we will feed back. So that will be one thing that we can do. But I think in the interim, if we say that any member who's got a concern about antisocial behaviour, if they drop an email into the community safety inbox, we can then pass that on to the relevant officers in any of the other services. So I think that's the best way to do it, because often, you know, we've only got one ASB officer in terms of Davina who collaborates with housing tenancy. But of course, if she's on leave, we're not looking at her inbox all the time. Whereas the community safety inbox, we look at that 2 or 3 times a day. So there will always be someone to forward on to the appropriate service. And we will respond to you to say who we sent it on to and what we've done.
Thank you. Just coming in on the antisocial behaviour from me. In the report, under 11.7, it says the council tenancy team had 100 new cases during Q3. And then it goes on to say what happened to 25 of those. I'm just curious, do the other 75 then not be found to be ASB, or did something else happen that isn't included in the report? Microphone.
Yeah, I think some of those are opened and closed almost immediately because a resolution can be provided straight away. But if you can allow me to just clarify that, and I'll add it in the minutes.
Yes, thank you. That would be great. Thank you. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you very much for the report. I have to say, as a new reader, it makes quite sobering reading for a first timer, but really good to see that most of the trends are going in the right direction. Sticking with the antisocial behaviour piece, in the stats in the appendices, I note you say that the red area of environmental is due to sort of misrecording against community events, and fines are the total still going down. I can see why there's confusion having read the definitions. It's not entirely transparent to me reading them, but there we are. Could I just ask, the trends we're seeing here of those overall recorded incidents going down, how does that compare with national trends? Are we sort of bucking the national trend, or are we going in the same direction?
I don't have those figures to hand. I can find out for you.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I don't know what it looks like nationally. So we just look within the force, but I'm sure I can ask one of our analysts if that is a trend nationally.
And it's just my gut feeling that nationally at the moment the scene seems to be going the other way, and I was just curious as to why we're being so fortunate in, you know, whether that's a significant improvement in policing, or whether it's something the council's done, or what. I was just curious on it.
I'll have to come back to you.
We'll put it down to better police.
If we can, we'll put that out in the minutes along with Sandra's responsive. Thank you. Councillor Laning.
Yeah, I'm going back onto the problems. On the late night economy, do we notice a difference in the number of antisocial reports relative to the number of establishments that are open late at night?
Again, I don't have that to hand. In relation to establishments, so we have a nighttime economy within Winchester City. We've established that for about 4 months ago. What that means now is we've got officers out on patrol from 7 o'clock in the evening until 2 o'clock in the morning when our last establishments close. We are in and out of all the licensed premises, working with door staff, working with licence holders. We've seen an increase in calls for service and an increase in crimes that are reported to us. I think that's a confidence. I think that's a good thing. So people are actually telling us more, and we're nipping things in the bud before it actually escalates. So for me, we're going to continue doing that, continue working on that. In relation to all our ISB linked to that, I can't answer that right now.
Sandra.
I was just going to add to that and say that our partners are also with the street pastors, who are eyes and ears, and they offer that extra security or helping hand, if you like, in the nighttime economy. But also we work really closely with the universities, both Southampton and Winchester, and the student unions. So we are very much a collaborative approach around the nighttime economy. And recently we were successful in a application through the Safer Streets Fund, where we are rolling out a programme around violence against women and girls in public places and around the nighttime economy.
Does that answer your question? Yep. Councillor Reach.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, thank you for the report. There's a mention in the report of Operation Chromium, which was trying to deal with sort of organised, well, semi-organised, unofficial car meets. My ward certainly had quite a few just here on the edge of Winchester, and it caused a great deal of disruption. It feels, anecdotally at least, that that's a problem which is more under control than it was certainly about a year ago, so plaudits are deserved. My question is whether the kind of low-level offences of, speeding and or what I believe is technically called a popcorn map, which young men particularly like putting on their cars to make them very loud and very noisy. This fills my postbag, and I'm sure other colleagues around the table as well. My question is where the distinction is between what you would lead on and what kind of roads policing would lead on, and if we feel we've got a handle on that kind of lower level but intensely annoying offences which I just mentioned.
Yeah, Op Chromium is an issue across the force. It's a force-wide initiative. They do like to come to Winchester and also to Whiteley. When they come to look at their cars, happy, let them go on with it. I've seen footage of where they're then illegally racing, which is very dangerous. We had one in Winchester a couple of weeks ago in excess of 200 vehicles. It was no problem. So they turned up, talked about their cars, drove off nicely. That doesn't always happen. We have to be intelligence led. So some of these car meets are arranged within private WhatsApp groups. If we get information that they are on at the weekends, we can stand up some extra units to support that. It's balancing out the priorities of what else is also going on. I'm not saying there isn't a priority. It does come under that antisocial behaviour. The calls for service aren't. I think that's where that perception comes in, that it's really annoying for the people that are living there in that particular space. And we're trying to work with the people that organise these meets to make sure that they are sticking to the law. I think about a month ago, we had a night of action over in Whiteley, supported by Fareham as well. I think we gave out about 40 tickets, a drug drive. So where they are committing offences, we will look to take their cars away. But it's very massively resource intensive, and you need to be in the right place at the right time.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair. A question that sort of relates to the high street here, and we see a lot of people sat in doorways who have a bed, but they choose the street. They can be very intimidating, asking people for money, perhaps slightly more aggressive in their behaviour because they've got they've taken drink or drugs or whatever. Can you help us all to understand what yourselves are doing, police and Sandra's team, to help? Because the impression that people tell us as councillors is that we're not really getting to grips with it on the high street, and there are times of day when it is much worse than others, obviously, and maybe we've got less cover, as it were, amongst the various agencies involved, but it certainly is an issue that blights our high street, and I wondered if you could help us to understand what your plans are to try and keep tackling that. There's the other piece of getting them help to get back to their beds and their accommodation, but when they're on the high street and being difficult.
So the CBOs that we've introduced has massively reduced that. There are still some people that we call them street attached. They attach themselves to the street. Yes, they do have somewhere to go. All of my PCSOs are aware who they are, and we work with them that if they are being intimidating, or committing offences, we will deal with that. The feedback that I've had from the Business Improvement District is that the shop's feeling that we have reduced those numbers. There's always going to be people that attach themselves to the streets, and we can work with them individually on an individual basis when offences are occurring.
Yep. In terms of Davina Damone Hollins is the ASB lead, so she works very closely with the bid rangers. They do joint patrols. There is a city centre patrol team through the police, but we've also supported a project that's run from Trinity, which is an outreach project. So they will come out anytime between 2 o'clock in the afternoon till about 5. So we can call them out. So if we've got an individual that we come across, we know they're housed, their role is to come out and to try and persuade that individual that maybe it's time to go home if they've had too much to drink, or you know, they're making a nuisance of themselves. So we have put in place some extended outreach. So the outreach is still available in the morning, but we now have an afternoon outreach specifically for the high street that's linked back to Trinity.
Chair, can I just ask them, because the time that many of us have this people raise it with us is the evening, when obviously there are less officers on duty, as it were, from our side or any of the agencies, but actually they sort of come out at 7, 8 o'clock at night, and you walk down the high street and they weren't there at 4 o'clock, but they're now there at 8 o'clock at night. So I'm just wondering, you know, that I appreciate this is a, you know, it's not something we can necessarily resource 24 hours a day, but the evening economy is a place where is a time when people do reappear and start to behave potentially badly on the streets.
So at the weekends, we have people out from 7 o'clock every Friday, Saturday now going forward. When our team are on lates, we've got them out on foot patrol. When we're not on lates, the bid rangers are on, so they've tried to work their duties so that we can have a bit of balance of both. And we've also got our response teams, so that if they haven't got any calls, we ask them to focus on certain areas as well.
I think you're absolutely right. We did identify that between 5 and 7 there is a bit of an issue, or there was an issue with begging. So if we notice that as partners, we will run additional operations so that we're out and about between 5 and 7. But we also alert our street pastors as well. So we are responsive, but we can't provide that service between 5 and 7, so it is down to the bid rangers and the police officers to manage it. But we, in terms of my team, will get involved and do extra patrols.
Thank you. Did you want to speak again?
Could I ask that if people do notice it, to call it in and report that as an ASB, because then we've got those figures to say, actually, we've had a number of calls, this is the time, and then that's where I can move the officers to actually patrol at those times.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Do we have any questions on the appendices? No. Okay. Do we have any debate? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I think the crime headline data for between April and December 2023 is very helpful. It just goes to show exactly what the police and the partnership has to deal with throughout the course of nearly a year, and no different. The themes will be the same moving on to this year, to be honest. So, but it's interesting to know what aspects and how things are being targeted. I think it's reassuring when you've got things like Let's Talk Hampshire Alert to be set up to give our residents across Winchester District a sense of feeling safe in their homes and in their communities. So that can only be a good thing. I don't know if eventually that will ever replace Neighbourhood Watch, because I think the Neighbourhood Watch has always been a good thing, but sometimes it's looking for the the volunteers and the coordinators and sometimes like that, but when it works, it really watch works well as well. I think it's very welcome that we've got the local officers. I met Will Andrews the other day at the police surgery in Stanmore. That was really good. I spent time with Rob Windows as well, PCCO. I've known Rob for years, so it was really good to do that. Sandra, I think actually your work with the university is outstanding. I know that because I've been involved with you over many years on that, with the welcome booklets and the engagement at Freshers Fair and the action days with students. It's absolutely amazing. I'm really pleased that we've got the community engagement officers. I think the walkabouts, especially I can concur in Stanmore, and the street meets were excellent, and long may that continue. That was a fantastic thing. I'm very concerned that sometimes it's probably more of a county thing rather than a city thing, that we've lost a lot of our youth work in the city over many years through maybe lack of funding and so forth like that. The Cal Centre used to be the Cal Youth Centre and had 6 youth sessions a week, and it doesn't no longer do that. And then they took the youth out and it became the Cal Centre, and it's a fantastic community resource. But it's still something lacking for some of our young people to do in the city. And sometimes we've heard it once, we've heard it 1,000 times as local members. And I'm glad we've got grants coming through for outreach, and Street Reach is an excellent organisation as well. But there's still something we need to watch as members moving forward. It's still something needs a bit more for the youngsters to do, and perhaps a little petty crimes would be sort of less around our areas as well. I think we've got an access for all event coming in the end of May in Stanmore. I think that'll be an excellent thing to do. I missed the party in the park. I wonder we could resurrect that as a city council again, because that used to bring all services together and something for all the families. I think if we ever could get the party in the park back up and running, that would be great. But in the meantime, access for all events will be an outstanding thing. But thank you for what you do, you know, as a police service, and Sandra, for your team, and within the partnership realm as well, because there's other agencies, you know, the Rangers and all that sort of stuff, and the bid feeds into all this as well. So thank you very much on behalf of the members of what you do for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Does anybody else have any debate? Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the report and coming to see us today. It really is fantastic seeing the work and the impact of the work that you're doing, how it's having an impact on crime in the Winchester district. I also really wanted to welcome, so I represent Bishop's Waltham, so really welcome the extra investment in having more officers running 24/7 outside the Bishop's Waltham station. I would wondering, maybe as a follow-up, I know our previous PCSO, Sarah McCulloch, who now works in Councillor Lee's ward as a CSO, held regular surgery. So I was wondering whether maybe in the future we could work together to sort of have further surgeries with the new local bobby, Rob Power, which you know, residents really appreciate. So I'd be quite encouraged by that. And I'd also like to invite Councillor Scott to the Bishop's Waltham party in the park that will be happening later this year. But no, it was really to congratulate you on the work that you've been doing and the impacts that you can see in the statistics that you presented to us this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the reports from everyone this evening. And I can only endorse the sort of joined up partnership working, because I think we're stronger together as a consequence. And also to the police team, the new team, as it were, in adding more police officers, more name bobbies. I think people have really welcomed that. It makes people feel more connected with their community. That can only be a good thing. I would maybe ask for consideration that we think about covering the early evening somehow. Maybe that's an action taking away from here this evening on those who are street attached. You know, there is something going on early evening. As Sandra said, we can't cover it all at the moment, but I think it's something that we all notice, and that is maybe something that we could look into being a change in our strategy and how we do things. The ASB reporting, I think, is really important, getting clarity about that, and indeed how we get to resolution on issues. We don't seem to always be closing the circle, and that could be that the links on all of that are not connected. So I welcome the thought that there is clarity on that and a new approach, and I think that is something we would all welcome. And I thought Councillor Lee's point is very important about that safety, particularly for the older community, and some of those changes in technology, and something that we as a committee should actually make sure we note, and all of us need to understand what that process is and how we're moving forward on that. I would also welcome a walkabout in my ward. I know you've done some of the city ones, and that is, I'm sorry to say, Corinne, that many in my ward feel abandoned by the police. We have a really, really bad hotspot that is known to many of the officers, and they feel that the police just don't care about them. And I think if we can rebuild confidence with you and your new approaches, that would be welcome. And I welcome the opportunity to work with you to reassure the community that we do know and understand their issues. I'm in the Wonston and Micheldever ward, and that may ring a couple of bells as to some of the issues that we have. So thank you for coming this evening and spending the time here with us. And I hope that we've had some useful discussions that will help us to develop our work in this area and continue to have good results. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reach.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually just building on a point Councillor Horrell just made around that kind of early evening period. My day job, I work for the railway. We know there are some people who commute regularly into Winchester, particularly to Beg. They're known to the station, presumably they're known to the BTP. I don't know whether you work that closely with the BTP, but there's a fare evasion and all sorts of things. So there's just encouraging closer working between BTP and Hampshire.
So they are part of our tactical planning meeting. So we do talk monthly from a BTP perspective. They cover from Cornwall right the way up to London with probably less officers than us. So, but we do work together with them and have that regular contact.
They're also representatives at the ASB panel.
Thank you. And thank you. And I hope your first meeting wasn't too painful with us. We look forward to seeing you again next year and hearing all the wonderful hard work. I'm very encouraged to hear the reduction in overall crime figures, so that's brilliant. So if you can pass our thanks from the committee on to all of your officers who regularly come and support us in our communities. I'm really interested next year to hear the difference that the named Bobbies have had. And perhaps the impacts that have had. So I'm really interested to hear that. The points I've got noted down are Councillor Lee to pass on to the LRF regarding the power outages and also the switching off of 3G and how that might affect things like emergency alarms. I've noted down if we could particularly highlight sharing the Hants alert and Let's Talk. I've noted down the point about 11.7 that I raised about the 100 ASB cases that Sandra's going to pick up. I've noted down for Corinne to see if Winchester figures follow the national trend and come back to us. And I've also noted down, can we consider looking at cover for early evenings for the street attached to prevent ASB and crime there. Is there anything I've missed on that list? Councillor Becker?
Nothing to add, just to suggest that we include a reference to Hants alert in DSU this week so everyone can know about it quickly rather than waiting for the minutes to come out.
I wasn't thinking in the minutes, it was a can we share that? It was a feedback from Scrutiny rather than a minute. Councillor Horrell?
Yes, and I think right now if the new setup for ASB is established, we should get that message out as well to everyone so that we're all clear what we're all doing, where we're reporting and how it's being handled, please. Thank you.
Sorry, we can do that through DSU.
Thank you. So thank you once again. And for your both your time this evening, you are now free to leave us. Thank you. So we now move on to our next item, item 7, the Q3 Finance and Performance Monitoring Report. We have brought this into the overall scrutiny meeting this evening, so the performance panel, due to the limitation of officers available for various reasons for the performance panel meeting. So this is replacing our typical performance panel update from the wonderful group who usually go through this report. We have Councillor Cutler who's going to give us a brief intro. Councillor Bolton and Councillor Lee, I have you both down for questions. Councillor Cutler's come forward, so I'll let him do the intro, and then Councillor Lee, I'll bring you forward, and then Councillor Bolton, if I may. Over to you, Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think this needs a huge introduction. It is the Q3 Performance Monitoring Report, which is in the same form as usual for these quarterly reports, and therefore it sets out the council plan, strategic priorities in Appendix 1, an update on the finances for the end of Q3 for general fund and the housing revenue account to the end of December, and Appendix 3, the refresh set of key performance indicators, and 4, the Tier 1 programmes and projects. So we have several cabinet members here who hopefully will be able to answer or take away some of your questions if need be. I mean, the one other thing is that I do have some new data on fly tipping, which I can share with you at the correct point in the proceedings.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Councillor Lee, would you like to come forward and speak?
Thank you, Chair. I have a few observations and questions. I have many more, but not enough time in 5 minutes to cover what I want to cover. So I'll go straight to it. So progress in the cost of living support during the cost of living crisis is obviously welcome. I just wanted to pick up on the citizens' advice closure of the Bishop Waltham office for a Wickham service, which I find disappointing, as Central Meon Valley residents only seem now to have a fortnightly drop-in advice opportunity in the Bishop's Waltham Library. Otherwise, they have to travel to Wickham or use online or telephone services, which is not easy for the vulnerable and elderly. So can I ask for this concern to be noted by this committee and the Cabinet for any future council contingent plans to address this perfect storm of inconvenience and additional costs for the vulnerable for accessing face-to-face citizens' advice services? Greener, faster. Observation, good news on the highest uptake for Winchester for the Hampshire County Council Solar Together, which I think is great. And I note further rollout of the EVCP, that's electric vehicle charging points, requires more local electrical vehicle infrastructure levy funding. Okay. However, as this is a performance report, I just wonder, should we not have a smarter electric vehicle charging point KPI expressed, perhaps in pro rata terms, for EVCPs against the government's 300k EVCP targets by 2030, hopefully based on local traffic flow and vehicles in the Winchester district. Obviously, after all, EVs have lower carbon emissions, about 1/3 less CO2 than petrol and diesel vehicles, which surely means we need a better and more transparent, greener, faster EVCP target to measure how far we are away from the real world local need, plus to encourage transport switch from fossil fuels. So I think there may be something missing there. I just wanted to highlight that. And can, therefore, the council perhaps set a smarter KPI for a greener, faster delivery rate target for EVCPs, please? Homes for all, some good progress. Well done to the housing team. However, I remain concerned, and I'm sorry to raise this question again for the third time, actually, last the Housing Committee and then full council, which went unanswered. As I've pointed out previously, we seem to have several different build retrofit standards. And AECB, Carbon Light, Passive House Plus, also as others express as a bit of a fruit salad, Passive House / AECB. Well, I believe it would be helpful to wider council and the public if we are clearer as to the build and retrofit design standards with performance targets we are striving for, plus whether post-works accreditation is achieved to that standard. We can then be clearer and learn from the actual performance and carbon reductions achieved post-build and upgrade works. And it is one thing to indicate a home upgrade or new build performance standard, but quite frankly, it is meaningless unless we know what the actual achievement is, especially as what is aimed for in energy efficient terms is not always delivered. And I suggest if we don't know the answer to these questions, how can we be sure our homes are achieving the best value for money, energy efficiency, environmental impact standards for this council and our occupants? This is more than just about EPCs, which, as many of you will know, it can be too unreliable. So the question is, what accredited build retrofit standards are we stipulating for our houses, and are they meeting the laid down accredited performance standards? And I'm sure we can create some KPI in terms of performance to satisfy that. And allied to this question is, where do we record and publish the total carbon energy savings for our new homes and those retrofitted to our higher carbon energy efficiency standard? And I suggest that this carbon energy data surely has relevance to the key strategic key performance indicators on page 96 onwards, and our council plan themes at Appendix 4. I really believe it would be helpful to have both qualitative and quantitative information and data in a joined up manner to better inform the delivery of carbon emission reduction targets. And I apologise if this is the case, but it's not transparent that this is happening. And can the measurement of cross-cutting theme carbon emissions, therefore, for reductions from housing be used in the performance reporting, in the tackling the climate emergency and homes for tables? Otherwise, I believe we are being disingenuous about our progress and successes. In Appendix 4, on page 96, I don't understand, and maybe it'll come out in your debate, the statuses are green for some of the measures, TCE 7 and 9, for example, so grateful for the explanation. And finally, can I ask, what does the nature emergency target mean? And I'm looking at page 118, 119. Good to see the pathway for assessment of carbon sequestration on Winchester's land will make recommendations on how this can be increased and aligned with the nature emergency targets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. We'll try and address some of those as we go through the meeting. And I'll come to you, Councillor Cutler, and to you, Mr. Taylor, shortly. Councillor Bolton, would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Chair. So as you said at the introduction, I'm here really just to go through my questions that were for performance panel. And I've repaginated them so you can quickly find where I'm referring to. So page 59 of the Scrutiny report, how are the carbon credits created in the Southdown National Park from planting trees when so many are being felled due to ash dieback? Surely it should be net increase in carbon sequestration. Please, can you provide details of the scheme? Also, page 59 mentions GEP Environmental have been commissioned to provide carbon assessments for businesses to reduce carbon footprint. By the end of 2023, 4 had been undertaken. Was this as expected, and how many are planned for 2024? On page 60, at full council, Councillor Westwood explained that reduced attic storage space after retrofitting loft insulation was a major obstacle to the programme moving at a greater pace. We understood that officers had come up with a storage solution for tenants, and I would be interested to understand more about the solutions and what the likely additional costs will be. Again, on page 60, can you clarify if any of the retrofit work can only be undertaken on a void property? Page 71, the costs associated with the construction of the 6 passive houses have gone through the roof. How will we establish value for money on this project? Also, do I understand that until this has been determined, no more passive houses will be built? Page 75, the wrong economic report has been posted on the website from the link, which leads to a Hampshire-wide report and needs to be amended. It might have been worth mentioning in the narrative that the correct quarterly report, footfall, is down in Winchester, which will not have been helped by the introduction of evening parking charges. Couldn't resist, I'm afraid. Page 100, it is excellent to see that the number of fly tips is down further. And I congratulate officers for their work in this area, in particular in relation to prosecutions. However, it is still the case that residents in the rural wards feel that their lived experience is far from what you would expect with the level of improvements in these numbers. After further investigation, I understand that due to changes in the fly tip contract, it can now take up to 4 to 6 weeks to clear a particular notified incident. This explains why the improvement in incidents is having no tangible impact in reality. Can you explain what has changed to result in this lengthy time it is taking to collect the fly tips, and what can be done to change this to a matter of days, not weeks, to clear? Will you agree to measure the time taken to clear fly tips and report on it to give greater transparency? Page 104, if the vibrant economy KPIs were all green, you might have been forgiven for thinking we had a vibrant economy in Winchester. Are we able to incorporate other more revealing stats like business confidence, economic growth, consumer spending, etc.? Page 107, again, the planning metrics would have you believe we are operating a planning system second to none, and that delays in planning applications were unheard of. As we all know, our lived experience is not the case, and so can you explain what you are measuring here and here that gives this false picture, and agree to redefine the metrics that will give us the true picture? There appears to be a bit of a theme running through these KPIs. If you measure the wrong metrics, it tells you a different story to reality, which means you fail to take corrective action where and when it is needed. Can the KPIs be revisited with a view to ensuring their relevance to quickly giving a true picture of performance? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton, and well done on time to both of you. Councillor Cutler, would you like to address some of those from the outset?
No, I think it would be entirely unreasonable to try to deal with all those questions in this meeting. But Councillor Lerny is here, could address some of the green issues things. We have going to if I could go through the list, it's actually quite difficult to know where to start on these things, and I didn't. It would have been helpful to have had that list of questions beforehand. But in the case of the fly tipping contract, we have already discussed in this committee several times the need to look at a clear up rate approach in the KPIs the next year, and we had agreed that we would look at that. So that one's fairly straightforward. I will point out that there is a continuing fall in the numbers of fly tip incidents, and at the end of Q3, I have the figures here that if the internet's working, 606 cases in those three quarters, which looks like the figures will end at the end of the year at that rate at around about just over 800, which will be probably another 20–30% fall. So it is a matter of the clear up rates, which is something we are addressing. I don't know if any of the other cabinet members wish to come forward to address any of those very specific issues, but this is I do feel that this report is a report, and there are not questions on those reports. There is additional information being asked for here, which doesn't quite fit into the spirit of it.
Councillor Loney, did you want to come forward and address some of the questions about the housing standards and the discrepancies, please?
We do also have Councillor Westwood here. Different standards are appropriate for different forms of building, and that's why we've been using a variety of different ones. The important thing is that they are published national standards that we can work to, which effectively tell us what will work. So I think the idea of stopping building simply to take several years to measure whether they're effective is not very practical at a time when we know that there is a desperate need for housing. What we can guarantee is that we will be looking to build to the best standards possible and practicable in order to ensure that our tenants have low energy costs in their nice new homes. I don't know which of the others you wanted me to pick up in particular.
There was a question about can reduction of carbon be put as part of the KPIs? Is that something that we can actively measure and can be part of the KPIs? That was from Councillor Lee.
I think, I mean, the officers might want to contribute to this, but I think it's very difficult. It will be a long time in arrears. So I would question the benefits really of doing that.
Would it be helpful if I just explained the concept of the KPIs to committee? Obviously, this is we've had this set for a year now, and as you can see on any of the pages, it sets out a set of long range trackers. So they are our long range over time series of metrics. So you can see direction of travel towards achievement, our progress towards the council plan objectives. And that is the purpose of this report, to assess how we are moving towards our council plan objectives. Then we have a little suite of measures underneath, which are data that we know exists, can be checked, is readily available, is relevant to the city council and is not from a cluster of partnerships, so it needs to be a real set of data to give us a, as it says there, a quick response. I am looking at one, for instance. Okay, anyone I choose will be difficult. I'm going to choose a red one, of course. Numbers of home in temporary accommodation, HFA 6. The numbers there vary between 54 and 62. Our target is 50, so it's red. So therefore, the purpose of this report, which is reviewed by your executive team, the directors and myself every month, is to say, are we pivoting our resources? Are we putting enough effort into the areas that are red so that we continue to support our work on tackling households in temporary accommodation? What would be super helpful is if this committee thought that was important, you tasked us to come back and give you a paragraph or two on that, so we can give you assurance that we are doing all we can within the resources and the capability that we have, and that we are looking at best practice, and that is how we are tackling that. So as Councillor Lowney says, there were several questions here on reviewing a KPI. The KPIs are a trend series. Also in here is a significant amount of information about the stonkingly good stuff, that's not a very chief executive phrase, is it, that the council has delivered over the past quarter, that again is attempting to give this committee assurance that we are all pushing and we are all facing towards delivery of the council plan. Every year we review the KPIs. So of course, Councillor Lee, I can see you've asked one about for EV. Councillor Lowney's mentioned the retrofit ones. There was another one there about the nature emergency target. Super helpful. Simon Howson is here who works on that. We can absolutely explore whether we can find a more relevant and helpful indicator for this council to say that is the most important thing we can use to track against delivery of that target, of that theme. If it is, we will put it in front of Cabinet and they can consider whether to include it or not. I think I would just offer that, Chair, just to help committee with the concept of the report that we've got, which is like, are we all facing our dominoes in the right way to deliver the aspirations which we all agreed at council in a council plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Taylor. And I know you and I briefly discussed whether, because we haven't had any scrutiny training for a while, but whether we could go ahead and organise some training for the committee on scrutinising performance monitoring and general scrutiny training, if possible.
Yes, Chair, you absolutely did, because it's super important, and many years ago, and there are some members in the room who were here many years ago, we asked an external group to come in to provide support for this particular function, which is absolutely within the gift solely of the Scrutiny Committee to assess performance, finance and risk. And we did that when we last made an adjustment to the Constitution and introduced the two policy committees, which are forward-looking, and the Scrutiny Committee, which is much more rearward facing, but also, as you know, members will take a strategic approach across an issue that might fit across 2 or 3 policy committees. Things change. I think the importance of a effective process to review performance, and here we've got finance and risk in this one as well, to provide advice and challenge to the Cabinet to ensure we're pointing all in the right direction, is really valuable. So very happy to arrange a training, a support network, whatever we need to do for the new committee for next year, of course, if you wish.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, you asked what else you might address. Councillor Lee asked a question about on page 118 and 119, the nature emergency, and what does it actually mean?
In terms of the sequestration, this is around some of the work that we're doing on our own council land. We're currently in the process of creating a report about what we might do more. But the important thing there, and this comes back to being able to measure it, is that we have a full understanding of what impact improvements and changes we might make to our own land would make in terms of both carbon and also in terms of increasing biodiversity. There are particular ways in which you can measure increases in biodiversity. Those are now fairly well understood through some of the biodiversity net gain metrics that have been developed as part of the planning process. So it is around bringing something back where we can evaluate what we're doing and understand exactly what difference we're going to make.
Thank you. There was also a question about the sequestration from Councillor Bolton about measuring carbon credits and planting trees when so many have been felled with ash dieback. How is that bounced off against each other?
That's a really difficult one, because the amount of carbon sequestered in a particular tree will depend on its what kind of tree it is and how large it is, whereas when you plant a new tree it takes a long time before it gets back to that situation. We don't know exactly how many trees are being felled across the district due to ash dieback, and it's not just ash dieback, it's other diseases that are proliferating as our climate changes. So this is certainly one where we do need to understand and promote the planting and particularly the replacement of trees. But I think trying to net it off will be a data collection nightmare, frankly. So we might be able to report on the number of trees that are being planted, but outside of the trees that we're felling ourselves as a council, I think it would be quite difficult.
Thank you. Councillor Cutler, you said at the start you might have some more. You have some updated figures on fly tipping. Councillor Bolton mentioned the fly tipping as well. Can you provide us with the updated figures?
I think I did, but there was to the end of Q3 for the year, we have had 602 reports that are the equivalent of the reports that we get back. I mean, there were more reports, but some of them are duplicates, some of them aren't public fly tipping. So the reports that go to add to those DEFRA figures and will be comparable with the previous year ones that were recently produced. There were 602 incidents in the 3 quarters to the end of December.
Sorry, so that's 602 individual incidents or 602 reports?
602 individual incidents that would go forward. There were 15 go back to the figures, there were 1,600 reports, but I mean, they're frequently reported as duplicates. So for comparable figures, that's 606. And if you take that 3/4 of the year, that would probably, unless there is a huge uptick in the next quarter, lead us to around about sort of 800, just over 800, which our fall was to 1,000 from, you know, the 40% fall the previous year. So we're seeing a continual reduction. That was really my point on that. I mean, the other figures here are that up till the 31st of December, from the 1st of April, there have been 35 full investigations. There's been 18 witness statements, 8 interviews under caution, 2 well, there was only 1 prosecution in December. We know we've had 2 since, and there are 2 more due next week. This is partly a problem with the court service. I think the 2 next week are, one is from September 22 and one is from February 23, but that's as fast as you can get them to the court. So both in my ward, I'm quite pleased that they're being done. The north of Portsdown Hill, very important, or a pretty bad area for it. In fact, we've got a major one there this morning. So I think what this does is really show that this policy of having a dedicated fly tipping officer who is experienced in interviewing and following through the prosecutions is a more effective approach than the DEFRA measured metric, which is how many fixed penalty notices we issue. We've issued 2 actually, and so we come very low in a league table on that. But in terms of the amount of reduction, I think the report on the previous years was that we were at sort of, I think, the 5th biggest fall in any district in the country. So, but I do take the point, and Councillor Petter's raised it before, Councillor Bolton has raised it as well, that the clear-up rates are something that add to a problem of, you know, the perception of the problem, and it is something we need to address with the ID Verde contract. When we had huge amounts, they had dedicated teams. When we've got fewer, they haven't got the same dedicated teams, but it is a problem of contract management and pushing them to stick within their targets, which are 10 days for the major ones and less for the smaller ones. It's the speed at which it's reported. It's not reported to them until, you know, for the big ones, the investigations have to take place first, and so there are those problems with it. But it, you know, having got the incidents down, I think our next priority has to be the clear up rate, and I'm, you know, so that's what we're working on now.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. There was also a suggestion in Councillor Bolton's questions about the KPIs measuring the vibrant economy, and whether we could incorporate different revealing statistics such as business confidence, economic growth, consumer spending. So, I mean, I'm not sure if that's something we could speak to the bid about or some such. Do we have any thoughts on that?
I mean, obviously, at the moment, we look at measures like footfall, and obviously, and as the report says, that was up in the quarter. I think there was a bit of confusion earlier. The only reference to footfall falling related to Meadowside Leisure Centre, not to footfall in the middle of Winchester, which was up in October versus the previous year, up in November versus the previous year, up in December versus the previous year, up across the entire quarter versus the previous year, and up in January versus the previous year as well. In terms of metrics, I think what makes sense to do, there was a reference earlier to this quarterly economy report. There is a lot going on at the moment with Hampshire's new arrangements for the replacement to the LEP, the local enterprise partnerships. So I'm one of 3 leaders that is now on the partnership, what are we calling it? The Hampshire Prosperity Partnership Board. And I think there will be sets of measures emerging from Hampshire who do the economic analysis for us that it makes sense to coordinate with, make sure it also reflects the work that we've done on the Green Economic Development Strategy. So I'm very open to having a look at those performance metrics and reflecting them in our KPIs as part of the ongoing council plan review and KPI review process that we normally do, to make sure that we're linking into other people's work that's already ongoing and ideally reflects that wider view on how our district is performing.
Thank you. And the other main one that I wanted to pick up, the councillor Lee said, was about the more charging points to be installed. Do we have an update on or thoughts on that?
The update on that is that we are in discussion about improving our existing charging offer. As many people will be aware, the speed of a charge really matters to people. So we are looking at that. What I will say is that the world of electric car charging is changing quite quickly from where it was a few years ago, where there was a lot of emphasis on things like street light charging. Those are very slow charging methods, and it can be quite difficult for people to find a charger on street in an area where you have general parking. So there is a move away from the thoughts of having lots of trickle charging effectively towards having fewer, faster chargers which are more convenient for people. So we do have to be aware of some of those shifts, but I do think it is relevant to have a look at the number of chargers, remembering that we are seeing an increasing number of commercial chargers as well. So this is an area where while the council will have a contribution to make, then the private sector will be playing a significant part as we go forward. I would also say, and it reflects a conversation I had with Stagecoach yesterday, where one of the managers said to me, well, it's all very well having all these electric cars, but they're still getting in the way of our buses. Congestion is still a serious problem, and we do have to think a bit broader than just concentrating on the electric car piece.
Thank you. Okay, committee, coming on to this, we have it's recommended the Scrutiny Committee raises relevant cabinet member and issues arising from this report, Ref Cap 3441, which will come to cabinet on the 14th of March 2024, and see whether there's any items of significance. I would also like, if there is anything we have particular concern about, if there's any projects we think that need to be initiated from the back of this, then let's do that in this room. So I shall come to questions on the main body of the report, pages 49 to 58. Councillor Horrell, was your question on that main body of the report?
Chair, no, it was on the appendix, but I just wanted to put on record, Chair, that I'm sorry the panel was cancelled due to the lack of officer availability, because I think we have found that with panel members, officers and some cabinet members, we have been able to have a conversation about the report. People have been able to seek clarification, get additional understanding, raise some points for future consideration, so that we try and leave the panel with only the key recommendations to this committee, and with most questions answered. And I think we've proven that over the recent past, and people have participated in that. For myself, I have many questions that I would want to raise through this report this evening, and I hope that we're still able to raise that, even though we have limited officers in the room again. But I do think it is important that the scrutiny process does go through not only the KPIs and the major projects updates, but also some of the narrative that we have been given in terms of the council plan progress, to your point, so that we know that we are on track and whether there are elements that we're in agreement should be raised. So I'm very happy to raise my questions, Chair, when we get to the appendices. Thank you.
Thank you. So does anybody have any questions on the main body of the report? No. Page 49 to 58? No. Oh, Councillor Reid.
You're too quick for me. I'm terribly sorry. It was just around, and I realise I made a complete cock up, and I think it is referring to the appendix. So I will apologise for a second time. It's Appendix 1 I'd like to ask a question on, but I'll wait my turn.
I'm coming to Appendix 1 right now because nobody has a question on the main body of the report. So if you have a question on Appendix 1, it's page 59 to 86, and in there we have climate emergency, living well, homes for all, local economy, your services, your voice. So Appendix 1, page 59 to 86. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Also building on Councillor Horrell's point, I think it's good that I'm pleased there are 3 cabinet members here, because it does give us an opportunity to discuss in public, and Chief Exec and others, to discuss in public some of these really important issues. I'm also quite excited at the prospect of some scrutiny training. I think that would be a good thing to do. Obviously subject to what might change in May, or who knows. But as a really kind of clear example of that, the comments around electric car charging, something that comes up a lot, particularly in my ward, because I represent a lot of terraced houses, frankly, where it's a big issue. And I know Councillor Ernie's comments, and understand that there is a very quickly changing picture in terms of technology for charging. But precisely because of that, I think it's really good that we can then scrutinise, because if the council is changing its approach, changing its tack on these significant issues, this is precisely the kind of thing I think we should be getting our teeth into. So there isn't a particular question on the substance. I have very strong views on electric charging, charging the car out the back of our house ourselves. But that's kind of not the point. The point is it's a really good opportunity for us to be able to challenge it in future. So I'd welcome a conversation, I think, about how we make scrutiny work better and more publicly in future.
Did you have a question?
Well, yes. Well, I can ask the question, which was, if we are moving away from the idea of many trickle charges, which we have, particularly in the city centre, but also some outside, have we considered the cost? Because luckily I can charge at home, so I pay 9 pence a kilowatt hour overnight, which is extremely cheap cheap electricity. Most of the on-street charges are around 30 pence per kilowatt hour. Rapid charges tend to be anything up to about £1 per kilowatt hour, at which price you're paying considerably more than petrol or diesel. So this is the point. It's a whole interesting and complex topic. My question is, have we considered that? Is it something we could have a longer conversation with in another forum, perhaps?
It is something that we've considered, and certainly the leader and I have discussed this on a number of occasions, and with both providers of chargers and with officers. I think what we really need is a healthy, competitive economy in charging. I think there is a danger that we end up with slightly monopolistic suppliers who can effectively charge what they like for the electricity. So ideally we want to promote that competitive market, but certainly it is something that we are conscious of and aware that is a particular issue. As you say, charging at home is very cheap. Certainly we try and do it when the sun's shining and our solar panels are creating a lot of the electricity, but that obviously is not an option available to the majority living in the town centre.
Councillor Todd?
A comment which relates to my role as county councillor, but it's probably helpful to add to it, which is that whole question as to how we deal with the 20 to 30%, it varies by area, of houses that don't have their own drive, but want to be able to charge their vehicles at domestic rates rather than at commercial rates, is a really important one. it's one that sits primarily with the county council, but as the highways authority, and there is innovation going on in other counties that we're not currently doing, such as the use of cable guys to get wires across pavements and other such things, which I know are areas that the county is discussing. There is something where we are looking at estate improvements and other such things that we may need in time as the vehicles become more popular and there's more uptake, to think about how we play a role in addressing that. But I think the general I suppose the point here is it's an ecosystem. There are a range of partners and players in this. The county council are players because they're the highways authority and have access to potential next to highway charging. We are players because we have car parks. And of course, there are commercial providers as well. And nobody quite knows what the answer is. But I think a proper sort of strategic and coordinated approach is likely to be what's needed. And in particular, something that I know we have offered as a district to the county is, well, can we sit down and look at what's going on with the charging on the lampposts in Hyde and our charger, our rapid charger in the coach park and our fast chargers in Worthy Lane, and look at that as a system and try and get a sense of how it's working and what role it plays and how we might need to develop it going forward.
Councillor Cutler.
Yeah, I was just going to add in one additional thing, which I suppose is which we discovered in West Waterlooville, that if roads are closed for a significant period of time, where you have a change of a system where people are actually refueling their cars at home, and they suddenly can't get there for 6 weeks, it creates a problem. And it's just another problem that ought to be into that mix, is that you actually have a change in structure. You don't go to fuel up, you go for your extra fuel. And that's why the fast chargers have become important. But, the vast majority are charging at home. As Councillor Todd pointed out, there's the 30% that can't do that. And that needs to be addressed with. But, it's just one of those, I just raise it as something that people need to be aware of, is if you know that a road's going to be closed for a considerable period of time, that is a new problem that has arisen.
Absolutely, we made quite a thing about that on yesterday's meeting, didn't we, about that road being closed and residents can't charge their cars. Councillor Hall.
Chair, I have two specific questions on Appendix 1, please. The first relates to tackling the climate emergency priority, and just seeking clarification under the council housing narrative, because we know that we have hit some tenant resistance to the whole issue of loft insulation and the use of lofts. And I know the portfolio holder indicated that there was some discussion about alternative storage being offered. What I'm not sure about is what that solution is. And also in the narrative, it talks about a officer, a dedicated resident liaison officer joining the team soon. This obviously relates to the Q3, but whether we have appointed that person, because my observation is that there are tenants out there who want to engage, and then for some reason they come up against barriers because their house isn't suitable or it's not on the right cycle. So just making sure that we manage expectations with residents who want to participate, but maybe their property isn't quite what we thought it was in terms of being able to retrofit it, but also those other mechanics around it, the officer support and solutions on the loft. Where are we to make sure that we move forward as positively on the retrofit programme as clearly we all want to do? So just looking for clarification against the narrative we've been given on that. And Chair, my other question, if you want to take that, or my other question goes back to the point that was already raised about the build standards for our houses, new houses. in my ward, we'll be having the first passive house on our own land, or passive houses. And I suppose it's just making sure that we put an action against ourselves about the standards that we have agreed to build to, what that has cost us and what the outcomes are, so that we can then all collectively look at those elements and make sure we're making the correct decisions when we look at viability and the like on other new projects, as to what standards we're working to. We know on the passive house scheme that I'm aware of, we've been delayed because we haven't had the appropriately certified materials to meet those requirements. So we've built in some delays as a consequence, but just so that we can all understand what those elements are, what the choices are, what the costs are, and whether we're going to look at that in terms of going forward, so we make better financial decisions on how we invest our new homes money. Thank you.
Councillor Westwood, are you happy to pick up both those questions?
That was a very long question, so I don't think I've got all of it, to be honest. I've got two questions I think I'm answering. One is around the storage, the loft question, people reticent to move forwards. And the second is on the standards for the new builds, the energy efficiency. Right? Okay, so in terms of the loft issue, then and I think I've reported it at Cabinet Housing before now, but the position was that we had people turning down the opportunity to retrofit their council houses and improve the loft insulation because they wanted to continue storing items in the loft area. And if you put 400 mil of insulation in a loft area, then the one thing you don't want to do up there is to crush that insulation and remove and reduce the effectiveness of the insulation that you're putting in. So the changes we've made are as follows. Firstly, we've revised our communication process, and I've talked about the communication process as being as important as the technical fit out of the properties themselves. And we are endeavouring to get more case studies. We've got a video on our website already about how effective we've been in a certain house, and the residents talking about it. So that communication program is been revised, the letters have been improved, and we are trying to be to explain the options more clearly to the tenants when they're going through this process. In terms of physically what we can do, we've got three options that we're looking at. Firstly is offering an area of roughly 4 square meters nearer to the loft hatch, if it is safe to put that in and provide insulation at 200 mil, so 4 square meters of area where items could be stored, but we request that should they choose to put items up there, that they do it safely and allow space for us to access the loft area for other maintenance work that we need to do from time to time. Second is within the budgets that we have for the retrofit program, we have budgeted for managing and providing additional storage space. Now this could be additional storage space inside the building. So if you've got an older house with chimney breasts and so on, and people are not making best use of some of those areas, then we can offer additional storage in those areas to give them further storage if they need more storage than they would be given with the 4 square meters, if it's safe to install that. And thirdly, we're offering external storage in a shed in the garden. Now, when we do our new builds, we don't allow access to the roof space in new builds at all, and we do provide additional storage both internally in the property and externally to the property for storage of items.
Thank you. On the new house thing.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify, has the officer started that says it was going to start soon in this report? I'm not sure. Thank you.
We have had a dedicated resource to lead the communication. As Councillor Westwood said, we recently introduced some copy warnings and things like that. That actual resource is not in place at the moment because you'll be aware we've been looking at the overall structure of the housing service. We now have a dedicated housing team. So the recruitment for the manager is taking place, the coordinator, and then the recruitment of a dedicated resource in terms of support for that team will be following on after that. So that specific resource is not in place, but it doesn't mean the work hasn't happened with other people that have stepped in to provide what's required.
Thank you.
On the new houses piece, I'm quite pleased you said that because I was feeling deprived that as somebody who bought a new house 12 years ago, we were told we weren't allowed to store anything in our lofts. It wasn't safe unless it was one empty suitcase. So actually it makes me feel less hard done by. I've got some really thick insulation. Any other questions on Appendix 1?
I have a further question to ask. Mr.
Apologies,
Chair,
sorry. Yes, you do. The second question.
which was around the standards we're using for the energy efficiency of our new homes. So basically, there are many approaches for developing energy efficient housing that have been adopted across the country and internationally, and there's no one commonly accepted model of good practice. Indeed, new approaches are developing constantly. For our new homes programme, the council has adopted different approaches depending on the individual circumstances of its new developments, and we're striving to exceed building regulations and local plan standards. Each of these schemes needs to be financially viable, and the financial viability does impact the energy efficiency and assessments that we make. So we're about to commission research that builds on the recent local plan research to give a better understanding of the balance between the environmental impact, capital cost, and cost to our tenants and residents, and help develop a consistent approach. But I reiterate again that we will use that and that consistent approach in conjunction with the viability assessments for the specific developments that we're looking at.
Did that answer your question, Councillor Horrell? Not quite, but thank you. I had a question on page 71. You had priority homes for all, and the very first, what we want to achieve is more young people and families living and working in our district. Out of that, over the last quarter, we have achieved. There was nothing specifically that referenced there, other than the Reg 18. Trying to make sure we had the right mix of houses so that perhaps there was some more affordable housing for younger people. But also in the Reg 18, it specifically said that there was no new work buildings that were needed as part of that Reg 18. And particularly in the rural area of our district, I don't see that there would be enough jobs that, for example, in the southern parishes, our younger people didn't have to commute to London, Portsmouth or Southampton to do. So is there anything we are focusing on or thinking about focusing on to help to tackle that?
So can I clearly understand the question there? So it is how we're providing a mix of houses. Is this the question?
No. On page 71, it says what we want to achieve. Can you turn your microphone off, please?
Sure.
It says what we want to achieve is more young people and families living and working in our district, for which the city centre is probably perfectly viable. But there is nothing in here in the Reg 18. It specifically said no new work units were required when they've done the assessment of the employee work units and businesses around the district versus the number of housing. But in the rural districts, particularly, and I'm referring specifically to southern parishes, but it's probably the same in your areas, I can't see that there is enough employment within the district that our young families and young people don't have to commute to Portsmouth, Basingstoke, London, Southampton to go out and do, because we just do not have enough rural businesses to employ that number of people. So I just wondered if there was any focus on that at all.
So we're talking about rural businesses. I'll look at my cabinet colleagues here because that's probably not an area that I am qualified to speak on.
I think this is another, dare I say it, another example of where the change in the LEP structure is going to have quite an impact, because one of the things they're required to put in place, particularly if you're talking about, for example, green construction skills and how we built the critical mass to do that and what they should be based around, is the so-called local skills improvement plan, which sits with the county and is meant to ladder up from what we're all saying across the districts about what we think we need in our area. I mean, in practice, it doesn't make any sense for us to be kind of unilaterally trying to change the market. Here in Winchester, we need to be trying to change it on a much wider basis. I mean, we talk about the fact of how construction is happening, or I think that's the framing we're talking about, how construction is happening throughout our district. I mean, if you look at where construction...
Sorry, Councillor Todd, I'm not talking about construction specifically. Your specific target that you said in this report we want to achieve is more young people and families living and working in our district.
Okay. Living and working in our district, that is very much a kind of local plan policy thing, which we are seeking to reflect in our local plan policies and ensure that that the relevant spaces are available for people to both live here and to work here as well. There is some further work that may be of interest in terms of the rural economy. So the EM3 LEP in its remaining few weeks, but we can get hold of the report they did a very helpful report on the rural economy and rural employment, which we asked them to do alongside Test Valley and East Hampshire, to look at what actually is the employment in the sort of mid Hampshire, more rural area, and does that have any policy implications for us? And again, this shift away from LEPs towards being more anchored in local government, probably for discussion of the economy and employment, probably gives us a better platform for that discussion alongside any work that we might be doing on the local plan.
Could I request then that perhaps some of that information on rural economy be shared with the committee, alongside, sort of as just a separate appendix to something, just to give us some insight into that, because it might help guide us on the thoughts on this target for more young people and families living and working in our district in the rural areas. Would that be possible?
Yeah, I'm very happy to arrange for that to be shared.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back to the new houses, if I may. Have we got any plans for the next generation of new houses to be net zero? I'll ask that question because a number of councils that I spoke to last week at a conference are ignoring Michael Gove's statement and increasing to net zero the standard of their properties that they're going to build.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously falls within Councillor Porter's remit. Certainly the view of ourselves and a significant number of other authorities is that Michael Gove's ministerial statement saying that local authorities should not be asking for anything over and above building regs is not sound either legally nor morally, nor does it make any sense when we have a climate emergency and the government has declared a climate emergency. This isn't just us as a council operating on that basis. We have written to government expressing that, and we will be working with other authorities to ensure that we are able to move forward with the LETI standards that we're proposing within the local plan. So right now we have no proposals to change the local plan as a result of that ministerial statement.
Thank you. Are you actually in contact with other councils that are already building net zero houses to find out how they're achieving it?
Well, there are a set of councils that I think we need to separate the two things. I mean, we ourselves are building, very low carbon homes, and that's for example, the passive house housing that we talked about earlier, despite some of the challenges associated with it. The net zero discussion that's going on very much relates to the LETI standards. There have been some local authorities that have had their local plan agreed and go through inspection with the LETI standards in place. So I believe there are about 100 authorities, of which we are one, that are writing to government alongside the TCPA, the Town and Country Planning Association, about the ministerial statement that was made about the kind of standards that can be used. That I don't want to get into all the technical arguments, but we have a legal duty as an authority under the Climate Change Act to be putting in place policies and plans that deliver the outcome of that Climate Change Act, which from the government's point of view is for us to be net zero by 2050. Obviously, we're seeking to work in a more ambitious timetable. So the authorities are taking a very strong line on this and making clear what we think the problems are with the view that the so-called written ministerial statement, which was published on December the 13th. And it was quite the whole argument which relates to LETI comes from this statement which came out of the blue without consultation about the requirement to use the target emissions rate. And so local plan, so there are authorities that are effectively being told not to implement their local plan. It's not even clear that the government can do that. So Bath and North East Somerset, Cornwall and Central Lincolnshire, I believe, already have adopted the LETI standard. So that's already in place. So it is quite a complex area. We are very much working alongside the many other authorities that wish to be able to put in place a sustainable, affordable, sensible approach towards achieving net zero. And suffice it to say, I don't think the argument is over yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on Appendix 1? No. Appendix 2 then. We have page 87 to 90 and 91 to 95. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Horror.
Chair, thank you. Can I just clarify on the disabled facilities grants? It says that we're going to be slightly overspent for the year, and we wouldn't want to stop such a good piece of work, but we're using DFG grant that was unapplied in previous years for that. Could you just remind us how much is in the pot? So if we're overspending, what have we got in the sort of the reserve pot that we can dip into this time if we have further requirements?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know the number. We'll have to come back on that. But just to give you some reassurance, we are ahead of this and looking at the current rate when we need to look at reviewing policy. So we're already doing work on that. We know that at the current rate of DFG expenditure, we will need to look at reviewing the existing policy, which you'll be aware was only reviewed 12 months ago. We'll need to look at reviewing that policy in 3 years' time.
We know it's a well-regarded opportunity, isn't it, for people to stay in their homes? So, and Chair, could I just ask another question on Appendix 2, on the very useful graph that talks about the capital spend. We're forecasting a 7 million spend, but we're actually at Q3 only at 4.5. So the run rate wouldn't indicate that we're going to use all of that money. What reassurance can we have that we have got that earmarked and that we will be spending that money for that period? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you can see there that we've got a working budget of 10.4 million. That includes carry forwards that were approved, bring it into this year, So yes, the spend is not looking like it's 3/4 of the way through the budget, 3/4 of the way through the year, but we have significant works scheduled for the fourth quarter of the year. So I expect to see that a lot closer to budget in the next monitoring report that comes through.
And do we think that's just a matter of timing, that we'll just roll those on? That's not, you know, we clearly have the cash, so it's not for those projects. It's just a matter of phasing, because it is a significant difference on those on the general fund capital.
Sorry, could you just repeat that question, please?
My question is that obviously there's the original the working budget here is significant. The run rate at Q3 is less than half of that, and therefore, are we anticipating that if we don't, this is a matter of phasing and timing on those projects, we'll just roll this forward at the year end to complete those projects as we go into the next financial year 24-25. Because obviously this is at Q3, this is way off what we'd be anticipating that investment to be.
I think Mrs. Key's response earlier was that there would be significantly more. So you have a forecast of 3/4 of it being spent in 3/4 of the time. So forecast of 7.5 million for the budget for the year of 10.4. And only 4.5 had been spent in the first 3 quarters, but Mrs. Key did indicate that there's quite a lot of expenditure expected to be in that, but it would normally, with any slippage, roll over. So there doesn't appear the slippage isn't as great as it appears at this point, simply because quite a lot of extra expenditure expected in Q4, and any slippage there is would roll over. So I think that's clear. I mean, it's actually been the case in virtually every one of these papers that we've had, that has been a very similar graph, and it slips because of circumstances.
And I've been asking the same question all the way through. But then, Councillor Cutler, we've got 4 key projects here, but they, in terms of their total budgets and what they've spent to date, that wouldn't eat into that gap. So obviously there are other projects not listed here, but you'd need quite a lot of others to actually get anywhere close to those numbers.
I think you're really clearly defining the problem that we face with this report and the amount of detail. We can either have all the detail, or we can have a series of indicators on it, and I can't then come back and find a whole lot more detail on it, and I think that's one of the things that we need to define here, because what seems to be happening, and it's not a criticism, but it seems to be I quite welcome your comments earlier about understanding how we scrutinise this, because even this question session has moved away from looking at the report, but looking at a whole range of policies. Now, given that this report covers nearly all the council's work, the possibility of ending up in a meeting where you talk all the policies through before you even get to the indicators, it becomes a problem. So I think we do need to be, we've just talked about housing policy. That's not actually about the performance report. And yes, it's interesting stuff to talk about, but I'm concerned that we end up drifting into having broad policy discussions rather than concentrating on the detail of the report. It's just an observation.
But Councillor Cutler, I'm very happy. I'm asking the question on the numbers on this report. It says 4.5 Q3. It says forecast 7.5, and you've got 4 projects that won't. So exactly on these numbers, not policy, how can we predict that year-end position based on the numbers I see before us here? No other questions, just the numbers you've kindly provided.
Yeah, and I think Mrs. Key's answered the question based on the level of detail in this report, which is that it's expected in the next quarter to catch up. This report says, yes, it is behind. And the answer you were given was that we don't expect it to be behind at the end. Unless we dig out all the detail on it, we can't tell you which ones are the problems. They're not in this report because the major expenditure is detailed though.
Mrs. King?
Only to add to that really, and I don't know whether it will reassure committee, but it is notoriously difficult to programme and forecast the spend for capital within local authorities. We're talking about multi-year projects that span over the end of financial years. So we do our best to set out the phasing that we think will happen with projects. But some where the projects haven't yet commenced at the start of the year, it is notoriously difficult to know the phasing of when that expenditure will be incurred. So the fact that this shows a forecast for the end of the year below the working budget doesn't alarm me in my position as Chief Finance Officer. I think that's something that you would see in lots of local authority monitoring reports. And it's not an indication that projects will fall by the wayside. It's purely to do with the phasing of those projects. So I'm not aware of any projects that if the budget isn't spent by the end of this financial year within the capital programme that would fall away. So they would be rephased into the future financial year.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with respect, Councillor Cutler, yes, absolutely on the training. I wasn't trying to delve into housing policy. I was trying to delve into, you have this target. I can't see anything moving, helping us move towards that. Do we need to fix that? So that was what I was trying to do based on this report. But yes, absolutely. I think we probably do need training. We haven't had scrutiny training for a few years now. Does anybody else have any further questions on Appendix 1? Appendix 2, Councillor.
Chair, there's a reference to Osborne and their claim for unpaid RPI, which goes back over 10 years, which is obviously a considerable time. Could someone give us some reassurance about where that's come from and the extent of that, and any exposure that we have now or into the future? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've resolved that now and agreed the payment to Osborne, which is included in the predicted overspend shown in the repairs and maintenance contract. The reason for that was the provision that was made against that wasn't sufficient to cover the total amount. We have now uplifted the rates going forward, so we could be more accurate in terms of what we think R&M will cost in the future in relation to those rates. So we have dealt with it as forecast as part of this report, is that the additional expenditure is captured within here. As you can see, overall, the HRA is showing predicted overall balance once you take account of the accruals that have been included because of the situation around the Winnell scheme, which will be reversed out in the next financial year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on Appendix 2? Councillor Reach.
Thanks, Chair. A question around, which I hope is within the scope of what we've got before us. On page 89, around the King George V Pavilion, which is very shortly due to open, and will be a fantastic facility, both for the city and the district. There was a very late request to me as chair of the town forum for some additional OPEX related to that facility around cleaning. My question is whether this is genuinely a one-off, or whether there is an issue that we need to look more closely at full project appraisal before committing to these sorts of schemes. I don't know the answer to that, but whether it's something we could flag as a committee to Cabinet, that they assure themselves that we've done a full appraisal of schemes before committing to the capital expenditure.
Mrs. Keys.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, when we do appraisals of all these capital schemes, we take the opportunity to look at all the revenue consequences, the operating costs of those capital schemes, and take that into consideration, particularly when we're looking at different options and affordability for those schemes. So yes, this is a one-off, and it was missed out of the appraisal, but clearly having missed it from this one, it's now right there, up in my list of revenue expenses to ensure we include in the future.
Thank you, and thank you for raising that. Anything else on Appendix 2? So now we're going to skip neatly to Appendix 4 because there is no Appendix 3. So as not to confuse me, can we make sure we're numbered correctly in future? So Appendix 4. So because this is a big appendices with an awful lot of information, I've broken it down. So we're going to start off with the first set of KPIs on the previous 5 topics, page 97 to 107, the initial tranche of KPIs. Does anybody have any questions from pages 97 to 107? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, what action are we taking to turn LW5 to green? It is clearly off track at the moment. Are there any particular activities we're having to undertake to improve that?
I think that's one we can take away. Councillor Becker's not here, and we'll try and address that at cabinet if you can note that one down.
Any other questions on those 10 pages, page 97 to 107? No. So 97 to 107 takes us up to the end of the climate, living well, homes for all, vibrant economy, your services, KPIs. Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Chair, we've talked about this before in the panel. YSY V4, which is about resolution of complaints, and we knew that it wasn't on track a couple of quarters ago, and although it has improved slightly, it is still showing red. And I'm just inquiring as to whether there are further actions required to improve that indicator. Thank you.
Again, I will take that away and get answers before cabinet. There was a YSYV 4 and 5, was that you were looking at?
Yeah. Thank you. If I may, Councillor Brooke, there are further comments in the notes on the next page, which sets that out. So you can see there. 61 complaints, 44 closed in 10 days, 17 later than 10 working days, 11 relating to property work, and 4 to planning and regulatory. So as you might imagine, and the director is of course here, some of those items that were not able to be closed in 10 working days would be complex issues that we can't close in 10 working days. But we don't have a metric that shows an extension was requested to 20 working days. So if the query is that the resident is left hanging, waiting at day 12, 13, 14, they know they are going to be booked in, they have been contacted. So it's just that the complaint isn't closed. They've not been contacted, but I'm sure Simon Hendy can comment if there's any further detail to give there.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just to give you some reassurance, because Councillor Horrell asked the question, is there anything more that we can do? And obviously this is looking at the position at the end of quarter 3. I can reassure you when you receive your next report, you'll see improved performance there, and there are less of those complaints that are outside that 10-day period. So we are making progress in terms of those housing complaints being turned around within the requisite time period.
Thank you. Anything else on this first 10 pages? Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bolton mentioned YSYV8 earlier, and I just look at YSYV9, not because I want to pick it apart in any way, shape or form, but I think it's a good example of what Chief Exec was saying earlier on, that there are measures in here which are useful for seeing how on target we are against the council plan. And there are other things which are relatively easy to measure and therefore are presented as being of use to us. Why is YV9? Councillor Bolton made the observation that whilst there is a green tick at the end of this, people's perception is that planning applications are taking longer than they should to be measured. In the rural areas, and particularly in the rural villages, the vast majority of planning applications are, well, they have the suffix TCA, trees and conservation areas, and they're applications for people to lop a few feet off the top of a tree because they have to do that because it's in a conservation area. They have to ensure that the planning authority has no objection. What people are really interested in is applications for an extension or a new house or whatever, how long they take to go through the system. So as I say, I'm not picking that indicator apart. I'm just suggesting that's one good example of where information is relatively easy to present, but it's, you know, like having today's Shanghai bus timetable on my desk. It's accurate and useful to somebody, but not necessarily to me. And I think that's just an example of one of the indicators that we might wish to look at for next year as being an example of something that is not perhaps as useful as it might otherwise appear at first glance.
Thank you. That's a really good point. So it's sort of filter out those quick wins that are done and dusted and helping them meet their targets, because we're concerned about the householder applications, the developer applications. Okay.
May I just offer? I mean, absolutely, we can take that away. As members are aware, clearly, V8 and V9 are statutory indicators which form part of the off-log suite, which we have to prepare in accordance with a set of defined criteria. We can, if that is a question, we can share that with members, of course, about what is met in there. As you can see, the notes in that say to talk about less reliance on extension of time, which is a permitted action for the local planning authority. But we wouldn't drop those because we have to produce those, and those are the national measure, which is produced on the Offlog website. But if there was a particular aspect you wanted to explore as a committee, it would be, no one's here from planning, I'm going to risk it, relatively simple to do a quick data run on one set. If that was an area you then thought you wanted to explore, because that was a matter that's important to our residents and important to our cabinet for delivery of the council plan. So, but we always review these on a yearly basis. So we are, as you've invited your committee already, Councillor Brooks, very happy to take suggestions to review those to check if there's a new set.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. I have dropped it down as a note. So thank you for raising that, Councillor Pett. Anything else on this part section before we move on to the next? No? Okay, so we're coming on to the carbon neutrality piece, including the project gateways, pages 120 to 137. Does anybody have any questions on? Oh, apologies. I completely skipped. I've missed page 108 to 119, which was the projects piece from the previous tranche. So pages 108 to 119. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, it relates to the overall graph, the RAG rating, where it indicates that many of the projects are sort of on budget, but they're not on time. And so my question is, you know, what do we need to do differently to ensure that some of these which have been delayed, we've heard in the past, but actually delayed even further, actually pick up time? Because we're hearing from residents that they'd like to see some of these things move ahead more quickly. For example, Central Winchester. So my question is it anything that we can influence to have a more realistic timeline?
Do you wish me to assist, Chair? I mean, of course, we are a quarter behind here. This is the position as of end of December. I think as members are aware, I mean, Councillor Lerney is here and can talk about the carbon neutral action plan work. This is an honest reflection of our likely delivery against targets. Members know that there is some information needed with respect to those major projects. It's not suggesting the projects are failing. It is just an honest reflection of that. Are we achieving against which are quite pretty ambitious timescales at time? I think the picture will be different on the next quarter.
Yes, if I can contribute there. I mean, just today we've had a carbon board reporting on an internal carbon board reporting on the status of the carbon neutral action plan for the council, and we have made considerable progress on that over this quarter, but that's not reflected here. We are keeping a very close eye on that, and we're improving the ways in which we're internally reporting, which going forward we hope will be able to reflect some of that in the reports that come to scrutiny and the other and policy committees.
Thank you.
I think similarly, if you look at Central Winchester regeneration, it's important to focus on the timings.
One moment, Councillor Lerney, can you switch on the microphone, please?
It's important to relate to the timings that have most direct influence on what people will experience, and that particularly relates to the development delivery plan, which is broadly consistent with the timetable that we've always talked about. I mean, I was talking to a wide range of the different designers and experts that our partners have brought in. I've been speaking to some of the major investors that sit behind our partners, behind the work that is being done by Jigsaw. But the timetable in here, we've always been very clear that we are not having a rerun of Silver Hill. We are going to take the time to do it in the way that is sequential, for example, as outlined in the SPD, which talks about sequential development, I think. That is sequential, planned, measured, takes people with us, and addresses the challenges that we have in such a way that something actually gets built, because there's no point in running fast and falling flat on your face.
Councillor Horrell.
I'm grateful for Councillor Todd for mentioning the development plan, because the plan date was September 23 and this report is it says projected end date Jan 24. It clearly isn't, and that's fine if there's more work to be done. It would just be helpful to those of us reviewing this to understand what that accurate projected date is, if more time is required. The approval is later on in the summer, but the initial plan is obviously clearly not drafted at this point. So if this report is to be helpful to reflect better what the projections are, would avoid those questions from some of us.
The development delivery plan is an evolution of what was agreed in the original development agreement. In fact, it's the outline of it as an attachment to it. So, and it was the basis of the bid that was put in by our partner. So, you know, what it says here is what will happen, July 24. That's very firmly the date that we're looking towards, and it's rightly highlighted as green.
Councillor Reach.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on the comments of Councillor Todd just now around wanting to avoid past disasters like Silver Hill, but also partially on Councillor Horrell's point around kind of timelines and deliverability, and looking particularly at pages 110, 111 and following. Has the Cabinet assured itself that the Council is not too defensive in its governance of major projects? It would be utterly understandable why we got ourselves into a very careful position, but are we pushing ourselves as hard as we can and delivering as quickly as possible?
most leaders of Winchester City Council end up with the scar tissue of one or more judicial reviews. And we operate in an environment where Winchester is a place where care and attention to the quality of governance is something that is incredibly important. And so I don't think we are too defensive. I think people hold us to very high standards in terms of complying with public law and the good principles of governance. And I make no apology for that. You know, we're sometimes, for example, in let's take the example of where we appointed our development partner, Councillor Brooke, ensured that we had an excellent and very thorough scrutiny meeting to look at the decision that we were meant to be taking. And then at Cabinet, we similarly made sure that we had properly examined all the issues that needed to be examined in making our decision. You know, one hears stories of Cabinet meetings and council meetings at other councils that last 15 minutes or half an hour. We will never be one of those councils. And actually, I think it's important that we're not, because one of the consequences of our care for governance is that we do genuinely go through and discuss the decisions that we're making in public, in detail, and that ultimately the knowledge that you will be doing that and having that discussion in front of other people is, I think, helps ensure better decision making.
There was a part of the question though that you didn't answer. Are we pushing ourselves as hard as we could? Practicably allowing for all of the pauses and doing due diligence that you've just referred to?
I genuinely believe that, you know, that I would say that both the councillors and the officers work very hard to ensure that we can move ahead at pace in most of the areas that we work in. It's been very noticeable, for example, in the discussions about waste, that we are ahead of most districts in Hampshire in terms of the depth of work we've done, the depth of discussion that we've had, the level of engagement that we've had internally, and our readiness to have discussions with Hampshire and other partners in terms of how we proceed with our future recycling programme. So I would say we operate in a very complicated environment. We operate in an uncertain environment, sometimes in terms of the national policies and funding situation that we're operating in. But despite those, we always seek to proceed at pace and with quality.
Councillor Reach, that was a really long way of saying yes. Does anybody else have any questions on part 10, section 108 to 119 on these projects? No? Okay, so as I falsely mentioned before, carbon neutrality piece now, including the project gateways, page 120 to 137. Do we have any questions on this carbon neutrality piece? No? Okay, then we'll come on to the waste recycling piece. I just want to add in here at this point that on the waste recycling piece, we were due to have a waste section as part of our work this evening, but that is now moved until after PERDA, so I'll come and discuss that when after we finish doing this report. I just wanted to note that at this point while we're doing waste and recycling. Does anybody have any questions on pages 138 to 147? No? Okay, coming on to the local plan piece, including the project gateways, pages 148 to 152. No questions on, oh, Councillor Horrell.
Chair, can I just clarify, we haven't had a local plan cabinet committee. When we get to the next stage of the plan development, is the local plan coming back here to scrutiny, or is it going to the cabinet local plan committee? Thank you.
I think we would expect the final draft of the Reg 19 would go through cabinet and full scrutiny, cabinet full council. I think we would also expect that there will be some interim steps before then, and the cabinet committee would be used accordingly. I'm sure the chief executive will correct me, but I think that's correct.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Brooke. Of course, the plan is agreed at cabinet and then referred on to full council for approval. I need to ask the monitoring officer for advisement on which would be the appropriate method to engage our wider group of members in that deliberation, so everyone was fully understood the situation and the policies within before it got to council. So I'm very happy to revert on that one, Leader.
I'm just having some sort of, if you can turn your microphone off, please, Leader. I'm just having some sort of flashbacks to a prior local plan memory in my brain where we combined the local plan committee with scrutiny, and didn't we go on for many hours? And so I'll be interested to hear whether that's the route we'd be taking again. So we'll await feedback on that. Any other questions on the local plan section? No. Okay. Ms. Taylor, will that be fed back to us as part of the minutes, just to say the workflow of that, please?
Of course, but I would anticipate having that answer for you by cabinet next week.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, right, moving on to the next section, we have new homes, pages 153 to 156. Do we have any questions on that? No. Station approach then is page 157 to 161. Do we have any questions on that? And we have the movement strategy, pages 162 to 167. Do we have any questions on that? No? Oh, Councillor Hogg.
Chair, park and ride we know is fundamental to unlocking some of the movement strategy, and the Northern Park and Ride was identified as the most important addition to that element of the movement strategy. Can I just help you to understand whether the Sir John Moore project and the Northern Park and Ride is our sort of only option, or do we have other backup options for a Northern Park and Ride location? Obviously there's a very natural connection there, but just to understand, so in terms of delivering Park and Ride in the north, obviously Sir John Moore is one way of doing that, but do we have any other options?
Is this one for you, Leader?
Yeah, obviously there is going to be a park and ride as part of the King's Barton development. So there will be a 200 space park and ride going in there, which will get our feet wet on the topic. In terms of options for park and ride, I do know that the county did a range of studies that looked at a range of potential sites. But obviously, given the allocation of Sir John Moore and the planned allocation for Sir John Moore within the next local plan, that is clearly the most sensible set of discussions to be having at this particular time. And I think that is the basis that everybody is working on, as far as I'm aware.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the movement strategy section? No? Okay, do we have any debate on this paper, please? Okay, so let me run through the points and actions that I've taken down. So in case I've missed any. So we've got concern regarding closure of the office in housing office in Bishop's Waltham. The citizens' advice, sorry. It would be, I've expressed that, so what can be done about that, presumably?
We'll contact, I need to take advice from our colleagues that work with citizens' advice on service provision in line with the SLA they have with us.
Thank you. Looking at the clear up rate as a possible KPI on, I haven't written that very well. I've just written clear up rate on clear up rate on KPI. So I need to clarify. I mean fly tips. Otherwise, I'll hand this to Matthew, and Matthew will wonder what I'm talking about. Scrutiny training and performance scrutiny training potentially. Councillor Hall.
Sorry, just on the KPIs, it would be helpful to understand from Councillor Cutler, Councillor Todd. There's been quite a few sort of suggestions around enhancement of KPIs. Maybe with Mr. Howson, we just need to understand when that input would be helpful in terms of the development, not of Q4, but of the future set, and how that is best handled. So there's obviously that one on fly tipping, but there are one or two others. How best we tackle that and how that input is managed. So that's a question to officers and the Cabinet, really.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Yes, you make a very fair point. Clearly, we'd want to start the new year, which is 1st of April, with a new set of indicators. So we would really be welcoming any comments for review in order that Cabinet could consider any changes for early implementation in the new year. So if there's some proposals, let us do that. Obviously, the officer team are already reviewing KPIs for practicality, credibility, coherence and relevance to delivery of our council plan. It may be that there are some ideas that we can't implement immediately, but I am confident as your lead officer that the set we have meets every scrutiny requirement of every council across the country. I've just been browsing here. Eastleigh Borough Council, for instance, have a 12-page scrutiny report that doesn't include any KPIs. So I think there is a broad range of information here for you to review. We'll happily do what's right for the people of our district.
And we, as a scrutiny committee, will find out which the best way of doing it is with our training. Whether we're supposed to have KPIs, that would be really good to know.
Chair, I think we're all saying we're not sure we want to follow Eastleigh's role.
I think if we can also communicate that to Councillor Bolton, because he had some suggestions on the KPIs in his questions, I know.
Chair, would it be helpful if we liaise with Councillor Cutler and Mr. Howson and just worked out how we put that in, gave you that input?
I think we've developed quite a long list here so far, and if we've got Councillor Bolton's as well, but I think it just needs a broader review across the whole piece, and we'll come back to you when that's complete, and then can discuss it further.
Thank you. Councillor Todd mentioned the reporting regarding rural economy that will be shared with committee members / fellow councillors. Going to come back on the number regarding the disabled facilities grant. Action to be fed back regarding page 99, how to get LW5 back on track. Planning a suggestion to separate out the indicators for the applications that Ms Taylor has committed them to in their absence. So actual householder applications, the things that really matter to the community. Could we report more accurate? Could the report more accurately reflect timelines and projections? And I know that we had some discussion around that, but I'm just leaving on here as a point of note. The workflow to be clarified for the Reg 19 clarification, and the KPI input for review now would be useful. Okay, was there anything I've missed on there? Okay. I'm almost disappointed we haven't come out with any specific projects for the team to look at while we're off having PERDA. So must try harder after we've had our training. Okay, so thank you. We have looked at this this report in earnest, and we'll flag those points to officers and to the cabinet. Thank you. Coming on to item 8. So I mentioned during the waste piece that we were due to have the waste contract coming to us this evening as a separate item. That's now been moved to the June cabinet. Therefore, we as a scrutiny committee will need to scrutinise the that in advance of the June cabinet. So looking at dates, the only date really that's available is the one at the moment on the 20th of May, which is when the performance panel is due to meet. So we would then need to move the performance panel meeting, but to have a public meeting of an evening, it would need to be on the 20th of May. I just wanted to check if everybody is happy that we've got scrutiny in place by then. I don't know who or what or where will be on the panel, but that in principle, those of us here this evening would be happy with that meeting on the 20th of May. Typically, the scrutiny meeting was scheduled for the 6th of June. So there's a possibility that we might be able to bring some of the items that would have been on the 6th of June meeting forward to the 20th of May, so that we don't have to have the 2 meetings, but that's for further discussion. So 20th of May sit okay with you in principle? Yep. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So coming on to the draft work programme. So the draft work programme shows the pre-programmed items such as budget papers, quarterly performance reviews. Does anybody have any comments on that? Councillor Horrell.
Well, Chair, you picked up a couple of things we've already discussed this evening. The local plan, where that's going, we'll hear. You've mentioned waste. We've been reassured that we're having the CWR development plan in July. So where is that on scrutiny's work plan? Is that going to the 6th of June meeting? Question. And also the Sir John Moore master plan, I understand, is coming, and that doesn't appear on here, which is obviously very significant. So just questioning whether they will come to scrutiny.
So certainly things like the waste project, CWR, when it gets to significant stages, will come through scrutiny. The work plan as it stands is currently the pre-programmed items that are on there, but of course the work plan will move and shift according to what business is coming up. Mrs. Taylor, did you have any comments on that at all?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I would want to give the committee reassurance that Councillor Brooke and I are pre-meetings with Matthew Watson, review the long-range forward plan, and Councillor Brooke indicates whether there are matters that she wishes to bring forward to scrutiny for consideration. However, as members know, not all papers need to come to a scrutiny committee or a policy committee before they go to cabinet for decision. However, our approach here is that we will often take an early sounding, a long range sounding from a policy committee when it is policy under determination, and then our officer team will work that up and then bring that to cabinet. So Councillor Brooke, if there are matters which you would wish to see at cabinet, we always discuss that. Sometimes if we can't accommodate those, then as we have previously, we've asked the cabinet member to attend for a briefing. Or we've called a special.
Councillor.
Well, Chair, I think CWR development plan and Sir John Moore master plan are such significant projects across multiple aspects of the council's work. I would have thought that this is absolutely the committee that they should be reviewed at.
I agree, Councillor Hall. Okay, so just noting that the current work programme is the pre-scheduled things and that it will lift and move and shift according to the work that is programmed throughout the year. Are we happy to just note the current work programme in its current format? And coming on to the latest forward plan of key decisions, you all had a look at that and that's noted. Councillor Lee, I believe you wanted to speak on this item.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I raised that full council and the question wasn't answered. And my question was, is the environmental, social governance factors, will they be used for investment decisions? Without an ESG approach or similar for our investments, I believe this strategy could be incompatible with our council policy, especially going greener faster and commitments to our climate and nature declarations and resolutions. I also said it would also make sense for the pooled fund approach to allow diversification to have a clearer link on to our climate and nature link to on how climate and nature damaging investments can be avoided. So the question is, can these concerns be addressed or clarification be provided before the 24th of April decision date? Because my concern is that our residents wouldn't expect this council to be slaves to business as usual by adding to increasing environmental risks with investment decisions. And I believe this is also a reputational risk. Thank you.
Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Liz Keys, our Chief Financial Officer, is here. There are just a couple of items on here that are standard items which give an officer delegation to act. And this is what this paper is here, Councillor Lee. Every day our finance team make decisions around investment up to the level of 250, I think it is, Liz, isn't it? I mean, working with our colleagues up at the county. So there is no formal decision here. This allows officers to make routine decisions with respect to our treasury management. If I may, Chair, I mean, the points you raise are I mean, I'm sure Mrs. Keys would have a conversation with you regarding the different methods of accounting. It would appear to be a matter for consideration at the audit committee if there's a question regarding of how the financial management of the council's accounts are taken. But Councillor Cutler is here and will also give a view, of course.
Yes, I wasn't entirely clear if this was about accounting within the council or about treasury management decisions. And the treasury management strategy was passed, and the decisions here in section C are, as the chief executive pointed out, the day-to-day decisions, and it's just always there in the forward plan. Of course, what wasn't there before was a proposed budget timetable. We now put it there so it's clear for everybody what that proposed budget timetable is, way ahead of time, and I think that's probably one of the areas where what you're discussing can be discussed in the autumn. But I would talk to the chair of audit a little bit as well as whether it's something that could be considered by the audit committee.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Lee? Okay, thank you. So the updated 3-month look forward was published on Thursday, so that's also on our desks. So is everybody happy to note this forward plan? Noted. Okay, that concludes our formal business for this evening. Thank you for your engagement. Much appreciated. Take care. Bye.